Hello everyone, my name is Max Turgeon. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Manitoba in Winnipeg. And today in this short video I want to give you a quick tour of RStudio and also a quick introduction to the two main data structures in R, namely data frames and vectors, so that we can get up to speed. In further videos, I may look into other data structures and also other aspects of the R programming language. And so, as you can see here, you have my RStudio, and it may look a bit different on your own computer, especially the order of the panels. But the panels should be the same. And so let's start here in the upper left corner. We have the console, which is where you can type R code and see the output right away. So for example, I can do 2 plus 2 and I get 4. Or I could also create variables and assign values to them. So for example, I can do variable and assign it the value 5.2, say. And now you may have seen something changed in the lower right corner. And so let's continue our tour in that particular corner, and you can see the name of the panel is environment. And it lists all of the variables that are available in the global environment. So in particular, we just assigned the value 5.2 to the variable named variable. And so we can see this in the environment panel. We have first the name. It tells us the type, which is numeric in this case, the length of the vector, but also the value, which is 5.2. And so this can be helpful when you're looking for the name of a variable you assigned maybe several lines of code earlier. Next, let's look at the upper right corner, which is where you can have your R scripts. And so here the name of the R script is untitled1 because I haven't saved it yet. If you want to open a new script, you can do this by either clicking on File, New File, and then R script. Or you can use here the button in the menu and click on New File, R script. The two are equivalent. And so in these R scripts, you would type R code that you want to save or that you want to share with somebody else. So for example, I could do something similar as we did earlier, maybe call my new variable var2 and assign it a string, for example. And so now this is our code that I can save and share with people. I can also run it by either highlighting it and clicking on the button Run, or you can also use the keyboard shortcuts, Command Enter or Control Enter. And as expected, you can see that it also updated the environment panel where we can see the name var2, which is now a type character, and the value is string. Okay. And finally, if we look at the lower left corner, we have an overview of the file system. And this can be helpful when you want to open either files like R scripts or text files, or, and this is what we're going to look at next, it's also helpful when you want to download, or import data into R. So for example, here I have a CSV file called crabs.csv, and if I click on it, I have the choice of either viewing the file or importing it as a data set. So let's do this. Let's import it. You can see that it opens up this dialog box that gives us a lot of information about this data set. It's just retrieving, as it says, retrieving preview data. So we'll see here in the center, we'll get a preview of the data set. And you can see that the first row contains the name of the variables, but also the type of data that they contain. In the lower part of the dialog box, we can change the name of the data set. So I could call it data set, for example, instead of crabs. And there's several parameters here that you can change as needed. And you can see here in the in the right part of the lower part of the dialog box, it's giving us the code preview. So a preview of the code that will be generated and through which you can import the data set into R and also view it. So the command view will give us a view of the data set. And so you can see here that the code that was in the preview box was ran into the console, and we get a new tab here in the upper right corner called crabs, and we can see the actual data. So again, we can see the the column names, and we can see all the data, each of the rows and the values of those variables. Okay, so what this did is created a new data type, a new object called crabs. So I guess the name change didn't work. And it's a special type. So this is a special type of data frame called spec-table data frame. It gives us information about the number of observations. So in this case, it's 173. And 5 variables means 5 columns. So that's one way to import data into R. Another common way is to use data that's available in a package. So for example, if I load the package dslabs by running the command library dslabs, it gives me access to all of the packages that are in this particular package. The one I'm interested in is the olive dataset, which I can look at by doing view, open brackets, and then olive. Just as before, it opens up a new tab in the upper right corner. Now we can see the olive dataset. So we can see that it contains several variables related to different compounds in the olive oils, but also information about the region and the area. This is one thing that's a bit different here as compared to when we imported the data from a CSV file, is that olive does not appear here in the global environment, which is due to the fact that it comes from a data set. So it's not part of the global environment, it's still part of the environment for this particular package. Okay, so just to recap quickly, we have 2 different ways of importing data in R. We have either from a CSV file or some file on your computer, or by importing a package and then accessing its own data sets. Okay, so next what I want to look at or explain is the concept of vectors, which are everywhere in R. And vectors are just essentially a collection of variables of the same type. So for example, when we created variable and assigned it the value 5.2, we could have assigned more than one value in a collection. And so for example, I could do vector 1, and then the easiest or simplest way to create a vector is to use the function c and then open brackets, and then you can write in the collection of values that you want to store in this vector. So for example, I can do 5.2, 3.5, and maybe 9.14, 14.5. So now this is a vector. And if I run this code in the console, again, you can see that it updated the environment panel. We get that vector1 is a vector of type numeric. The length is 3 as opposed to 1. And we can see a summary or a preview of the data that's stored in that particular vector. Another very common way of creating vectors is through sequences. And so there is a function called seq for sequence. And it can be used in many ways, but the easiest one is that you can start by giving the first element of the vector, let's say 1, and then the last element of the vector, let's say 10, and then we can say by 0.5. And what this does is that it creates a vector that starts at 1, ends at 10, and each step increments by 0.5. And so if I run this line of code, again, you can see that it updated the environment pane. Vector 2 is still of type numeric. It's of length 19. And then in the preview, we can see that indeed it jumps by 0.5. So it goes 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, etc. And so as I alluded to, there are many ways of using this function. And so if you want to learn more about it, you can always look at the help page. And one way to access this help page is by, in the console, you can use the question mark and then the name of the function. If you hit enter, it will open up the help panel here in the lower left corner, and you can access the documentation for this function. So you can see, for example, that there's also a parameter called length.out, which controls the length of the vector that you created. Okay.